Mocking in any framework is a skill that you have to develop over time. And usually that skill involves restraining yourself because, mocking can be destructive at certain points and make you want to smash your head against the wall. In our case, we're mocking the call to Stripe. And while that works, sometimes you got to wonder, am I mocking too much? There could be logic in create subscription that we are completely just trampling. Really, what we really want to do is we just want to make sure that the API up at Stripe is not being hit. And for that, we could use a tool like knock. This thing is bleedingly simple. All it does is mock the HTTP calls from your code to an external API. So take a look at the way you use it down below. You just require knock, and then you instance it, giving it the core URL that you want to use. Then you give it a verb like .get, and then some additional part of the URL. And finally, with .reply, you specify the return information that you want returned to your code. To me, this is just right. The least amount of interference that I have, the better. So let's head back over to the Stripe API documentation. I'm going to need to find the URL. So for stripe.customers.create, let's hit curl up above, and this will give us the straight up URL information that we need. Here, we can take the core URL, which is https api.stripe.com/v1, and we can use that with knock. So now what I need to do is install knock, and I'll save it as a development dependency. All right, so now that that's in, let's just require it above. Simple enough. And now for the best part. I can take out all of this mocking stuff from Sinon. I'm not going to be mocking the billing object anymore. So down here, I can leave this stub for our database because I do want to stub that. And I will set up knock. That's pretty straightforward. I give it the base URL of the API, https api.stripe.com/v1. I'm going to send a post off to /customers. And as a reply, I have to specify two things. The first is the HTTP code that I expect, and that's 200 or 200 OK. And then I'm going to tell it the data that I expect to come back. In this, I can use my helpers and just say I expect back a good Stripe response. It almost seems too easy. Well, in case I get anything wrong, I do want to reiterate that I am using a fake Stripe key up here. So if for some reason the call goes through, it doesn't matter, it'll get rejected. Let's try it out. Wow, that is impressive. It's nice and fast, and the only thing that's getting mocked is the HTTP call, which means that the code in my create subscription method is actually getting called. That's great. Okay, well, let's copy and paste this down below here for a bad Stripe response. And what I'll do down here is I'll just drop this in before, the same way I was doing above. And I'll call this a bad call. And it's going to post to the exact same thing, except this time I'm going to return a bad Stripe response. This is the one with the error. Seems like it should work, doesn't it? What do you think? Could it be this easy? Let's give it a whirl. Flipping over to our console and, oh geez, false is not equal to true. Yep, so it looks like it's still successfully working. All right, well, let's see if we can troubleshoot this. Our bad Stripe response is formatted as the way it should be. Let's just console.log the result that comes back from process application. I want to be sure that it is indeed returning an error for subscription, and it is. There's our subscription object returned from async. And yeah, your card was declined, yet for some reason success is true. Welcome to Mars. Seems like we are getting into trouble with a very, very simple tool. Yeah, as I said before, mocking is easy, sometimes too easy, which makes it hard. Mocking is one of those things that you really have to work on in order to understand when you blow it. And there's an old saying when it comes to mocking that you should never mock something that you don't own. Now, I could mock the billing process myself because I coded it. But here I am mocking the HTTP library. I'm intercepting the call, and bad things are happening, and I have no idea where to even start. And now, for a little behind the scenes here at Pluralsight, in preparing this demo, I actually had to sleuth this little problem here quite thoroughly. It led me to quite a few interesting discoveries. because to me, it didn't make any sense. I'm just returning the data that the Stripe API returns. The Stripe library that I have installed here in Node, it should have seen that data and said, aha, an error happened. Now, for some reason, it didn't. And the only way I was able to figure this out was to actually crack open the Node modules directory and go into the Stripe library and see what it expected. You would think it would be something like an error code being returned. Nope, it was this guy right here. It's looking for an error object on the response from the API. If it sees that, then it says, okay, an error happened, and then it'll stop things. I also tried to return a 402. You would think that that would trip up the library, because if you go over and take a look at the Stripe documentation, it'll tell you what the API return codes are all about. In this case, 402 means request failed. Parameters were valid, but the request failed. That is precisely the response that you would think would trip up the library, but no, it's looking for an error object. Oh well, that is something that I had to sleuth, and I managed to fix it. But that's the problem with mocking something that you don't own. You have to crawl into someone else's code and figure out how to fail it, which is just never a good idea. So where does this leave us with Knock? Should we use it? Should we not use it? Well, it's a great tool. As you can see, it's quite effective. But when you have to have something fail, make sure you know how it's going to fail. And this usually means you're going to have to know a lot about the library that you're trying to manipulate with Knock. So I don't think it's a bad thing. It just requires some investment on your part.